am I here, Detective Wong?
Well, I'm investigating a kidnapping. A very important person is missing. You were last seen near Judy's office. What were you doing near there, Emily?
I didn't go inside Judy's office. I walked past her office to the coffee machine.
Did you see anyone else there?
Yes, I saw a woman. The woman was wearing a purple dress.
Purple.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure?
Yes. The woman who I saw was wearing a purple dress.
In this crime story, you will hear many adjective clauses with object pronouns. For people, we have 4 options: who, whom, that, and nothing. Let's start at the beginning. The main parts of a sentence are the subject, verb, and object. To identify them, it might be easiest to find the verb phrase first. Emily saw a woman. What is the verb? Saw. Everything after the verb phrase is loosely called the object. In this case, it's a woman. For people as an object of an adjective clause, we have these 4 options. What do we know about this woman? Well, she was wearing a purple dress. We can combine these 2 ideas together. We replace the object, a woman, with a pronoun. The woman who Emily saw was wearing a purple dress. The woman whom Emily saw was wearing a purple dress. The woman that Emily saw was wearing a purple dress. The woman Emily saw was wearing a purple dress. Of these 4 options, whom is the most formal? It is more commonly used in academic and professional writing, not often used in casual conversation. Let's take a look at the new sentence structure. What is the main verb phrase? The main verb phrase is was wearing. Remember, an adjective clause is a dependent clause. It is attached to the original noun, like an arm to your body. In this case, the original noun is the woman. The subject of this sentence becomes the woman that Emily saw. The main verb is was wearing, and the main object is a purple dress.
She had a purse. The purse was big. The purse that she had was very big.
Tell me more about it.
She was carrying an orange purse. It looked heavy.
Are you sure?
Yes. The orange purse, which she was carrying, looked heavy.
For things, we only have 3 options: which, that, and nothing. Again, the main parts of a sentence are the subject, verb, and object. The woman had an orange purse. The verb is had. The object is an orange purse. For things, as the object of an adjective clause, we have these 3 options. What else do we know about this orange purse? The orange purse looked heavy. Let's combine these 2 sentences together by replacing the object, an orange purse, with a pronoun. The orange purse which she had looked heavy. The orange purse that she had looked heavy. The orange purse she had looked heavy. Of these 3 options, which is the most formal? It is more often used in writing than in conversation. Look at the sentence structure. What is the main verb? Looked is the main verb. Had is a dependent verb that is attached to she, which is attached to the original noun, the orange purse. The subject is now the orange purse that she had, the main verb is looked, and the object is heavy.
So the purse she was carrying was orange. Is that correct?
Yes.
Liar! No woman in a purple dress would carry an orange purse. I need to hear the truth. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth that I need to hear.
All right. I took Cheerleader Peter. I kidnapped Cheerleader Peter. I love him too. I kidnapped the man I love.
I knew it.
Let's review. Detective Wong said, I need to hear the truth. Tell me the truth. The truth is a thing, an abstract idea. Using the second sentence as the main clause, Detective Wong turned the first sentence into an adjective clause. For a thing, what are the 3 ways to do this? Tell me the truth which I need to hear. Tell me the truth that I need to hear. Tell me the truth I need to hear. Emily confessed, I love the man cheerleader Peter. I kidnapped him. Emily put this adjective clause into this main clause. For a person, what are the 4 ways to do this? I kidnapped the man who I love. I kidnapped the man whom I love. I kidnapped the man that I love. I kidnapped the man I love.
Thank you so much for your good work.
You're welcome.
I missed you, cheerleader Peter. I missed you cheering me on as I work. Are you happy to be back?
Adjective clauses with object pronouns. Guided practice. Let's do some guided practice to help you work with object relative pronouns. Let's review some important ideas about adjective clauses with object pronouns. Here is a sentence. Peter is the man whom Emily and Judy both love. Here is the adjective clause, and it describes which man the women love. Look at these sentences. Peter is the man. Emily and Judy both love him. Here, the repeated noun is him, the object of the verb love. So our first thing to remember about clauses with object pronouns is that the relative pronoun is the object of the verb. Next, the verb agrees with the subject in the adjective clause. In the adjective clause, you can see both a subject and a verb. Love must agree in number with Emily and Judy, so no S at the end of love. Emily and Judy love. Finally, relative pronouns for object pronouns that are people are who, whom, that, and nothing, while for things, it's which, that, and nothing. Let's practice choosing the correct pronouns. Here's a sentence. First, look directly after the missing pronoun. What do you see? Here, we have a subject and a verb. That means you need an object pronoun. Next, look before the missing pronoun. Is it a person or a thing? This is a thing. So we can use which, that, or nothing. Here, because I'm doing a grammar exercise, I'm listing all of the options. But if I were writing, I would choose only one of these. Also, note that we do not put this 0 when we're writing. It's only for grammar exercises. Now you do the others. Pause or stop your video and play it again to hear the answers. Okay, here are the answers. For number 2, we have a subject and a verb, so we need an object pronoun, and toy is the noun we're describing. Toy is a thing, so choose which, that, or nothing. Next, here's the subject and verb, and we're describing detective, a person. Who, whom, that, or nothing. Finally, for the last one, Peter adores is the subject and verb, and woman is the noun it describes. Woman is a person, so who, whom, that, or nothing. Learners often ask, what's the difference between subject and object relative pronouns? Well, these are subject pronouns and these are object pronouns. Notice that the object pronouns have a whom and nothing added on. Here's a sentence. Let's look after the pronoun. There's a subject and a verb. That means we need an object pronoun. The word animal is a thing, not a person, so choose which, that, or nothing. The lady who owns the Peter doll is Judy. For this sentence, we have only a verb after the relative pronoun, so we need a subject for that verb, a subject pronoun. Next, lady is a person, so choose who or that only. Now we're going to talk about combining two sentences into one sentence. This will really help you in your writing. The mask is hilarious. That means funny. The detective is wearing it. Remember our steps for combining sentences? First, delete the repeated noun in the second sentence. The repeated noun is it. That means mask. Take it away. Next, we need to replace it with a pronoun. It was the object of the verb is wearing, not the subject. So choose an object pronoun. It means mask, which is a thing. So replace it with which, that, or nothing. Finally, move the adjective clause and rearrange it. We want to move it here, right after the noun it's describing. Then add the rest of the adjective clause like this. Here's your new sentence. The mask, which, that, or nothing the detective is wearing is hilarious. Of course, when you're writing, you'll write the sentence this way. You could write it 3 different ways. Now, we're not repeating as much as we were with these 2 short sentences, right? Our new sentences are more complex and advanced than the old ones. Goodbye. Okay, now you're ready to practice on your own. You can do it.
Using whose in adjective clauses. Do you know who this girl is? I'll give you some hints. This is a photo of a girl whose eyes could not see. This is a photo of a girl whose ears could not hear. This is a photo of a girl whose teacher taught her to read, write, and even speak. And this is a photo of a girl whose name is famous all over the world. Do you know who this girl is? Right, it's Helen Keller. Now notice, all of the sentences begin with the same main clause. This is a photo of a girl, followed by adjective clauses that are underlined. Now all of these adjective clauses begin with the same word, whose, which is a possessive pronoun. Let's talk a little bit more about possessive pronouns. The most common ones are my, your, her, his, and its, our, and their, which are all words that represent nouns and that show ownership or relationship. For instance, my hair is messy today. My hair shows ownership. Mrs. McGee is their teacher. Their teacher shows relationship. Now let's talk about a different possessive pronoun, one which we use with adjective clauses. Whose? Take a look at this photo. I want to say that I met this man and that there were certain features about him that were unique. I met a man whose mustache is very long. What else could we say? I met a man whose voice is very deep. What about this photo? I want to say I saw a dog with certain features. I saw a dog whose ears are very big. I saw a dog whose legs are short. Do you see a pattern? After whose, add the noun. In these examples, we see whose mustache, whose voice, whose ears, and whose legs, followed by the main verb in the adjective clause. Great. So we know that whose represents a noun. In adjective clauses, whose can represent either the subject or the object of the main clause. This is a photo of a girl whose eyes could not see. Whose represents girl. I met a man whose mustache is very long. Whose represents man. And I saw a dog whose ears are very big. Whose represents dog. Now in all three of these sentences, do you think that whose represents the subject or the object of the main clause? Good job. It's the object. But what about the subject? Take a look at this clause. The boy is the youngest. This is going to be our main clause. And notice that the boy is the subject of the clause. We could say, the boy whose shirt is red is the youngest. And whose represents the boy, the subject of the main clause. Here's another example. The girl is the fastest. The girl whose hair is black is the fastest. Whose represents girl, the subject of the main clause. Great. Now be careful because the possessive pronoun whose is not the same as whose, which is the contraction of who is. See if you can fill in the blanks with the correct whose. Number 1, the lady blank holding her belly is 8 months pregnant. Number 2, the lady blank belly is very round is 8 months pregnant. Did you figure it out? Number 1, the lady whose or who is holding her belly is 8 months pregnant. Number 2, the lady whose belly is very round is 8 months pregnant. Well, I want to thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Adjective clauses with a possessive pronoun. Guided practice. We'll do guided practice with whose clauses. In the last video, you learned about whose. Helen Keller was a woman whose life was inspirational. Inspirational means it makes you want to be a better person. First, you learned that whose is a possessive pronoun that has a similar meaning to my, your, her, his, its, our, or their. In the example, you could say Helen Keller was a woman, period. Her life was inspirational. Whose in this sentence means her. Next, you learn that whose and a noun always come together. In this example, whose is like her, so life, the noun, must come immediately after. Finally, after whose and a noun, there's going to be a verb. Here, it's was. You also learned the difference between whose and whose. This whose shows possession, like these possessive adjectives, and the other whose means who is. It has a verb in it. Here are some sentences about these kittens. Which whose should you choose for each? Take a moment to think about it. Okay, for number 1, use this whose. Why? For one thing, because you need a verb in this adjective clause, is. It's like saying, it is in the middle. Okay, for number 2, it's this whose, because it's followed by fur, a noun. It's like saying its fur has many colors. Finally, the last sentence needs this whose, because you need a verb. Who is like saying it is next to the black cat. Now, after you've read all 3 sentences about the cat that I want, which cat do you think it is? It's this one. Finally, let's combine some sentences so that you can see how to do this in your own writing. The kitten is adorable. Its fur is orange and gray. First, delete the repeated PP. That means possessive pronoun. That's its. So take it away. Next, replace it with whose. And move it so that it's directly after the noun it describes, kitten. And here's the final sentence. Much better than these 2 short sentences, right? Okay, now you're ready to practice on your own. Meow. Have fun!
Which one of the following sentences is wrong? That is the teacher to whom I spoke yesterday. That is the teacher whom I spoke to yesterday. That is the teacher who I spoke to yesterday. That is the teacher to that I spoke yesterday. That is the teacher that I spoke to yesterday. That is the teacher I spoke to yesterday. The answer is number 4 is wrong. In this lesson, you will learn how to correctly make sentences using adjective clauses with prepositions. With each of the sentences from before, there are 2 parts, the main clause in blue and the adjective clause in red. When we look closely at the clauses, we can see 2 sentences. That is the teacher, and I spoke yesterday to her, where the red sentence tells us more about the first sentence. In the first part, teacher and her mean the same thing, and to is the preposition. Now, to put the sentences as one adjective clause sentence, to her needs to move right after teacher. Then we need to replace her with an adjective clause pronoun such as whom. We can also move the preposition to after the verb spoke. Instead of whom, we can also use the informal who. We can even replace who with that. We can leave out the adjective clause pronoun completely. So we have, that is the teacher I spoke to yesterday. When we talk about people in adjective clauses, we can use whom, who, that, or nothing. But if you want the preposition right after the noun being described, for example here, the teacher, then the only choice we have is whom. Here's another example with the main clause in blue and the adjective clause in red. Here's the email about which I told you. Here's the email which I told you about. Here's the email that I told you about. Here's the email I told you about. Again, when we look at the clauses more closely, we can see 2 sentences. Here is the email, and I told you about it, where the red sentence tells us more about the first sentence. In the first part, email is the same as it, and about is the preposition. The adjective clause sentence tells us more about the email in the main clause. As in the last example, we need to move the preposition close to the noun we are describing. But this time we replace it with which. Or we can move about to the end of the adjective clause. We can change which to that, or even take it out completely. Now when we describe things instead of people, we have to use which, that, or nothing. But after the preposition, we must use which only. Now let's look at another example. I called the man to whom I sent the email. I called the man whom I sent the email to. I called the man who I sent the email to. I called the man that I sent the email to. I called the man I sent the email to. But in reality, the most common written form of the sentence is the one with that. But in speaking, the most common form is the one without a pronoun. In this lesson, you learned how to correctly make sentences with adjective clauses with prepositions. Thanks for listening.
Adjective clauses with prepositions. Guided practice. We'll do guided practice with prepositions. You learn that prepositions are words like these. Here are two sentences. The banana was slippery. He stepped on it. What's repeated in the second sentence? It. It is the object of the preposition on. And what is it? A banana. Let's review how to combine these sentences in different ways. If your object is a person, you can use the preposition plus whom, or that, who, whom, or no pronoun with the preposition at the end of the adjective clause. If the object of the preposition is a thing, use the preposition and which, or that, which, or no pronoun with the preposition at the end of the adjective clause. Here, it is a thing, a banana. You can put which in the place of it, like this, and move the adjective clause after banana, like this. This is the most formal way to write it. If you want to impress someone with your academic writing skills, use the preposition before the pronoun. Or you can put which, that, or no pronoun at the beginning of the clause. You choose which one. And add on at the end of the adjective clause. But be careful. It's easy to forget these little words like prepositions, but you need to add them back in. Here are all the ways to do it. Here are two new sentences. A woman helped the man. He was walking with her. We're describing the woman, so let's choose one of these pronouns. Here you can use the preposition first, like this, and that's more formal, or you can add the preposition at the end of the clause, like this. Now let's practice a different type of exercise, choosing the correct pronouns in a sentence. Let's look at this sentence. The man blank I told you about fell on a banana peel. First, look for a preposition. Here's one at the end of the adjective clause. Now, look at the noun the clause describes. Man, that's a person. Look here. We can use that, who, whom, or nothing, like this. Now, try these. Pause the video and think about your answers. Then play when you're ready to hear. Okay, you should have found these prepositions and looked at these nouns. For number 2, we can only use which because it comes after on. And for 3, we can only use whom because it follows by. And for 4, the preposition comes at the end, so we can use that, which, or nothing. Okay, now you're ready to practice on your own. If you make a mistake, like slipping on a banana peel, don't worry. Just learn from it. Mistakes are a necessary part of learning a language. Good luck!
In adjective clauses. Okay, let's begin with a quick review of adjective clauses. Now, adjective clauses are clauses, so they are made up of a subject and verb. And they start with relative pronouns like who, whom, which, that, and whose. But what do adjective clauses do? Well, they modify or in other words, describe nouns. Now here are some example sentences with adjective clauses in parentheses. 1. The students who arrived late sat in the back of the room. 2. Michael is the person whom you have spoken to on the phone. 3. No one bought any of the computers that weren't on sale. 4. The garden is full of flowers which only bloom in the spring. And 5. I congratulated the mother whose child won first place in the spelling contest. In blue, you can see the relative pronouns that you've already learned how to use. Who, whom, that, which, and whose. And in red, you can see the nouns that they modify. Students, person, computers, flowers, and mother. Now you already know that who, whom, that, and whose are used to modify people, while which, that, and whose are used to modify things. But what about where? Well, it's used to modify locations or places like cities, parks, rooms, even space, or places on the internet. Now let's talk about different places in California using some of my own photographs. The place where I took this picture is called Joshua Tree National Park. It is a huge, beautiful park in San Bernardino, California. And they have lots of trees that look like this, and they are called Joshua trees. These photos were taken in a forest where you can find red trees called manzanita trees. They are in Santa Barbara, California. There is an aquarium in Monterey where you can see many different types of jellyfish. And in San Diego, there is a museum where you can take a photo with a gigantic dung beetle. They also have lots of cool dinosaurs. The museum where I saw a Pablo Picasso sculpture is called LACMA, the Los Angeles Contemporary Museum of Art. Don't you think the sculpture looks a lot like a rooster? Now let's take a look at the first sentence. The place where I took this picture is called Joshua Tree National Park. Do you see where the adjective clause is? It's right here, where I took this picture. Now, this adjective clause modifies the word place. Where is the pronoun, I is the subject, and took is the verb, which follows the structure where, the pronoun, plus the subject and verb. What about this sentence? These photos were taken in a forest where you can find red trees. Here's the adjective clause, and forest is the location word that it modifies. Now let's look at 3 more sentences. I'd like for you to think about where the adjective clauses are and which words they modify. There is an aquarium in Monterey where you can see many different types of jellyfish. Do you see the adjective clause? Here it is, and it modifies aquarium in Monterey. Next, in San Diego, there is a museum where you can take a picture with a gigantic dung beetle. Here's the adjective clause, and it modifies museum. And last we have the museum where I saw a Pablo Picasso sculpture is called LACMA. Here's the adjective clause, and it modifies the word museum. I'd like to take a closer look at the last sentence. The museum where I saw a Pablo Picasso sculpture is called LACMA. Now, the adjective clause, where I saw a Pablo Picasso sculpture, can be written in several different ways using several different pronouns. Here, using where, there is no preposition. But let's take a second to think about what this sentence is saying. The adjective clause is saying, I saw a Pablo Picasso sculpture in a museum. And the rest of the sentence is saying, the museum is called LACMA. Do you see a preposition in the first sentence? That's right. In is a preposition. Now let's use in order to express the original sentence in several different ways. The museum in which I saw a Picasso sculpture is called LACMA. The museum which I saw a Picasso sculpture in is called LACMA. The museum that I saw a Picasso sculpture in is called LACMA. The museum I saw a Picasso sculpture in is called LACMA. Notice that this last sentence does not have a pronoun, which is totally fine. And all of these sentences express the same idea as the museum where I saw a Picasso sculpture is called LACMA. Now I'd like to give you another example using this photo. Here, I am at a cafe where I'm learning to play chess for the first time. Notice anything strange? Yeah, the game pieces were really big. The cafe where I learned to play chess had very large game boards. Now let's think about the several different ways that I can express the same idea. I can say the cafe at which I learned to play chess had very large game boards, or the cafe which I learned to play chess at had very large game boards, or the cafe that I learned to play chess at had very large game boards. And finally, the cafe I learned to play chess at had very large game boards. Now, you have a lot of choices here, but I do want to point out that the most common forms would be using where and also not using a pronoun at all. For instance, I can end this lesson by saying, I hope you enjoyed hearing about some of the places where I've been around California. Or, I hope you enjoyed hearing about some of the places I've been to around California. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope you feel more comfortable now expressing your thoughts about places using where in adjective clauses. Using when in adjective clauses. The type of adjective clause you will be learning is how to use when plus the subject and verb. Now, what type of nouns do you think when modifies? Well, time words. Some examples of nouns of time include time, season, morning, period, moment, anniversary, year, month, and day. But of course, there are many other words that refer to time. Now take a look at these different images. Which time period do these images represent? The 1940s, the 1950s, or the 1960s? The correct answer is the 1950s. So let's talk about the history. Now, one thing that I can say about the 1950s is that the 1950s was a time when many great products were introduced, such as the color TV, Lego toy, car seatbelt, and remote control. Now, I think we can all agree that these are pretty great. Now, I bet 1955 was a very exciting time for both children and adults because 1955 is the year when Disneyland opened. Also, the 1950s was a period in history when some very important things happened. For example, DNA was discovered. Also, NASA was founded. And the polio vaccine was discovered, saving hundreds and thousands of children. Now let's learn a little more about each of these events. Pay close attention to the use of when to form adjective clauses about time. The year when Cambridge scientists Watson and Crick discovered the chemical structure of DNA is 1953. Since then, we have learned so much about all living things thanks to these scientists. October 1st, 1958 is the date when NASA became operational to begin space explorations. Since then, our understanding of our place in the universe has never been the same. The date when Dr. Jonas Salk announced the effectiveness of the polio vaccine on the radio is March 26, 1953. Thanks to Dr. Salk, there are almost no known cases of polio now in the U.S. Take a look at these sentences. Where is the adjective clause? I've highlighted for you where the adjective clause begins and ends. Let's take a look. The year when Cambridge scientists Watson and Crick discovered the chemical structure of DNA is 1953. October 1st, 1958 is the day when NASA became operational to begin space explorations. The date when Dr. Jonas Salk announced the effectiveness of the polio vaccine on the radio is March 26, 1953. Now, do you remember what I said about these images? The 1950s was a time when many great products were introduced. Now let's talk about the adjective clause in this sentence. We have when, the pronoun, plus many great products, the subject, and were introduced, the verb. And this adjective clause modifies time. Now the sentence is basically saying the 1950s was a time many great products were introduced in that time. There are several different ways that you can express the same idea. The 1950s was a time in which many great products were introduced. Notice that with which you should use a preposition, the appropriate preposition. The 1950s was a time that many great products were introduced, and the 1950s was a time many great products were introduced, using no pronoun. Using when and no pronoun are the most common forms. Let's take a look at another example. Let's combine these two ideas. 1955 is the year Disneyland opened in that year. Do you remember how to complete the sentence? 1955 is the year when Disneyland opened. Here are some other ways that you can say the same thing. 1955 is the year in which Disneyland opened. We can also say 1955 is the year that Disneyland opened, or you can simply say 1955 is the year Disneyland opened. Let me test your memory one more time. Combine these two ideas. The 1950s was a period in history. Some very important things happened in that time. Well, the answer is the 1950s was a period in history when some very important things happened. Well done. Well, I hope you had fun going back in time with me, and I hope that you are more comfortable using when in adjective clauses. Thanks for watching.
Adjective clauses with where and when. Guided practice. In this video, I'll show you the place where I met my husband. Notice the noun, that's a place, followed by a pronoun, where, and a subject and a verb. Later in this video, I'll tell you the day when I married my husband. Again, we have a noun, but this time it's a time. There's a pronoun and a subject and a verb, in that order. Earlier, you learned that these are the pronouns for adjective clauses with a preposition. Now, let's add to these pronouns for things the location and time pronouns where and when. Let's review how to combine these sentences so that you can practice on your own. This is the city. I met my husband in this city. First, delete the repeated noun, this city, like this. Next, look at this preposition. That means we have many choices for pronouns. Here they are. We could put which or where here and write the sentence like this. This is the city in which or where I met my husband. Or we could use these pronouns with the preposition in at the end of the adjective clause, like this. This is the city which I met my husband in. This is the city that I met my husband in. This is the city I met my husband in. Check. Now, would you like to know which city it is? Do you want to know where I met my husband, Brendan? It's the beautiful and romantic city of Guanajuato, Mexico. We made sentences about a place, but with a time, you use the same steps. May 27th is the day on which or when I married my husband. May 27th is the day which I married my husband on, or that I married my husband on, or I married my husband on. Now, let's practice a different exercise, choosing correct missing pronouns in a sentence. First, this is the site blank we got married. It sometimes helps to think of how you would divide the sentence into two, like this. This is the site. We got married at this site. Okay, we can see that there's a preposition, at. This helps us to choose the right pronouns. But in this adjective clause here, we don't see at. So we're not going to choose these pronouns. We'll choose these. At which and where. Let's look at this sentence. This picture was taken on the day blank we were married on. First, look for a preposition in the adjective clause. Here it is at the end of the clause. So that means we can choose these. That, which, or no pronoun. Okay, you're ready to practice on your own. You'll practice with where and when clauses, and throughout the course you've also learned about making adjective clauses with objects of prepositions, whose, and object and subject pronouns. You've learned so much. Awesome!